But that's a crazy conspiracy theory, don't you know?
Hey, for the man whose grandfather was mysteriously killed, I don't blame you for believing it.
Touche. I'm here with Bobby Kennedy III, the writer and director of Fear and Loathing in Aspen, which is out now in select theaters from Shout Studios. Bobby, how are you doing?
Hey, I'm doing great. This movie came out after a long and crazy trip, as they say. So,
Are you talking about the production itself or just 2020? Or both?
Yeah, I'd go with both on that. The production itself was just as crazy as 2020 for me personally. But when we were actually supposed to premiere at South by, we had we had the Paramount Theater, which is the biggest theater there. We had a Thursday 8:30 p.m. slot. It was primo, and that was the first thing canceled because of the pandemic. So then we were kind of just sitting on our hands for a year, and now here she is.
Well, it's you're getting the movie out. That's still a hell of an accomplishment. I think we were all in sort of this holding pattern of like, what is going back to the movies going to mean, and how are we going to be able to watch stuff, things that are in the can will see the light of day. So, it's cool that it's finally out. Now, first, apropos of nothing, or perhaps everything, your film about Hunter S. Thompson's run for sheriff is coming out on my son's birthday, and my wife and I actually named him after Hunter Thompson. So I always love a good bit of cosmic irony.
Freaky.
Yeah. So it's Thompson's run for sheriff of Pitkin County in 1970. Why did you decide to make this as your first narrative feature, and why now? What was it about the late 2018, 2019, I'm guessing, when you're putting this together, that said this is the time this movie needs to come out?
Yeah, well, I think there's a few reasons. It was the 50-year anniversary. I've always been a big fan of Hunter, and I kind of ended up reading sort of the deep cuts of Hunter, his letter books and Fear and Loathing in America. Just gorgeous stuff, but it struck me how much of a kind of echo of that part of history that we're currently living in, with the sort of the policing and the riots and the political environment, all sort of are strongly related to what happened in the late 60s. And it also, I sort of have a personal legacy in there as well, because I think a lot of it was kicked off by my grandfather being killed or assassinated. And I also knew Hunter growing up. I was living in Aspen at the time I decided to make it, and I just saw that sort of Hunter Thompson for sheriff poster with the sheriff's badge and the peyote button and the fist in there. And I was like, what the hell is that about? And kind of decided to look into it further. And man, what a story that is. It's something more people need to know about, because people treat Hunter like he was Raoul Duke, his character, the Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas guy. But he was an incredibly thoughtful, sharp political mind who had a lot to say, and it's still relevant.
So you knew him, coming up. What, in terms of like the casting of looking for someone to play the man that you knew, I think in Jay Bulger, you've got a portrayal that we haven't really seen before. Everybody knows Johnny Depp from Terry Gilliam's film, and a few people have seen Bill Murray play him, and they're both on that almost a cartoonish wavelength, whereas Jay is playing him more as sort of a strange human being. How did you find someone that knew just how to strike that balance, and did you have to coach and work with him, or did he just kind of get what you were looking for?
Yeah, I would say Jay's a natural. His career oddly also sort of mirrors Hunter's in some ways, and that he kind of, he worked for Rolling Stone. He had a bit of a Gonzo thing with his film Beware Mr. Baker, and he just seemed right for it. And I think he's obviously got an uncanny physical resemblance and sort of the same mannerisms. So there was definitely no coaching. Maybe there was sort of a trying to contain his presence. But I thought he really knocked it out of the park. I'm glad we went with him, because, we were looking at some more famous people for a while, but I think, it was right to have somebody who could, who people could really see as Hunter rather than some sort of another famous person playing Hunter. And even then, I don't think that Johnny Depp or Bill Murray was really playing Hunter. I think they were playing Raoul Duke, the wild alter ego. I think it was nice to make something sort of more about the man.
And there's something that was kind of surprising to me, and again, it's not something we've seen a lot of the popular portrayals of him, is the relationship between him and his son Juan, and even the kind of strained marriage that he had with Sandy. There's just little details that are inserted throughout the film about his run for sheriff. I'm curious, what was it about those moments? Because they could have been left out and just had more crazy scenes at the Jerome Hotel, but I feel like there was really something that you were trying to get across by putting these little moments in there. What were you thinking about going with that direction?
Well, as I said, I based a lot of the movie on his letters from the time, and a lot of them are telling his friends how about his sort of life now farm and trying to kind of save his marriage, save his family, and it's important to put in there because it shows you that this man, he wasn't just fighting to be kind of as they say, as he says, a burger Shrek, just fighting for the sake of fighting the system. He wasn't just some sort of terrorist. He was actually trying to preserve his way of life and preserve his family. And I think, from what I heard and from how his letters seem, it does seem like kind of it started all to fall apart for him after this sheriff's loss. I think he was really devastated by it, and I don't think he ever fully recovered.
And this was before he wrote the books that really put him on the map. I mean, I know Hell's Angels was kind of a big deal, but he established the true Gonzo journalism first with some of the Rolling Stone pieces like the Kentucky Derby, and then Vegas after the sheriff thing. But he's sort of in a weird middle period here. When you're putting this together, what kind of research are you doing, and how much of your personal experience with him informed the way that you told the story? And also, since you knew him a little bit, did you find that there was any of the mythology that sort of made its way into the history books that didn't quite ring true to you as far as how he lived his life?
Yeah, I mean, as you say, I knew him a little bit. I was probably 7 years old. My dad was certainly better friends with him, but I did have a lot of, because I was living in Aspen when I was writing it, I had a lot of access to his old friends. I think there were sort of two Hunters in a way. There's the pre-fame Hunter, and then there is the sort of post-fame Hunter. But as you said, this is kind of the origin story of his fame, and it sort of echoes the story of Aspen, where it kind of, I hesitate to say, but the fame definitely changed both of them, right? And I think, as you said, the Derby piece, Fear and Loathing on the Campaign Trail, Fear and Loathing in Vegas really cemented him as one of the most famous people in America. He couldn't walk into a room anymore without his reputation sort of preceding him. And I think what I was trying to hark back to and make the movie about is the pre-fame guy, and the striver, and the serious thinker, and the really the man whose his heart bled America. And I think that's why you can't really consider him just one man. I don't think you can consider anybody just one person for their entire life.
Now, one of the things that struck me most about Thompson's writing, I'm curious how it affected you, considering, as you mentioned, you are who you are, and your family is who they are. In the film, there are a couple of references to, he's writing a book about the death of the American dream when he decides to run for sheriff, and it was never quite finished. It sort of morphed into the Rolling Stone pieces for Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. But he talks about the 60s and the turmoil and the assassinations and the kind of police state stuff. When you first discovered Thompson's writings about your family, essentially, and the way that he wrote, I think, so poetically about the Kennedys, sort of changed the way that I felt about them. Did that inform your opinion of your grandfather and his brother?
Oh, definitely. I mean, up until Thompson, I suppose, a lot of the biographies. I mean, I've read my grandfather's books, and I've read a lot of books about him, but reading a book from an author that I, really kind of vibed deeply with, as much as I vibed with Hunter, where you can really see, like, talking about how he's just weeping and staying up all night, just trying to thinking if that he doesn't turn off the television, what he's seeing won't be true in the morning. It's such a different take. It does make you realize how much of the death of the American dream that was to not just him but a lot of that generation. And it's people always come up to me, and everybody has their story, about my grandfather if they're from a certain age group. But they're all most of the stories I get are from kind of they're not as fresh as those that are in his letter books, because he's writing them one day after it happened, or maybe a week after it happened, if he couldn't get it together to even put words on paper. So there's something very visceral about it. It definitely affected me.
And what was it about Thompson's writing that kind of turned you on to him initially? What was your first Thompson book, I guess?
I think, like everybody, I read Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas in college, and like 6 times. And then, and then I read Hell's Angels, and then I started getting into the deeper cuts. Fear and Loathing on the Campaign Trail, I think, is his best work. And but in those letter books, there are some short pieces that are just jaw dropping, and because they're so funny and so insightful. And I recommend anybody that sort of never got deep into Hunter to go and pick up one of those letter books, Proud Highway or Fear and Loathing in America, because they're filled with gems. Anybody that's got an interest in the late 60s, early 70s in general, and sort of some, because we're reliving it right now, for better or worse. I mean, there might be some solutions in there.
Well, and that's another thing I was curious about, because watching the film, yeah, it's hard to ignore the parallels, but what do you think, would there be a place for a Hunter Thompson in contemporary America? Do you think someone with his unique voice would get swallowed up by the internet, or do you think he would be someone who could break through?
It's hard to say. There obviously was there was less content back then, so people there, but I do think also that you got Matt Taibbi still rocking it. I subscribe to his Substack, and I think there's going to be, and to some extent maybe even Joe Rogan is like the sort of a new Hunter Thompson-y character. I think and I think Hunter kind of probably had that. It's not a huge segment of the population that's going to be down to read about mescaline and it's kind of the inside part of politics, but it will always inspire passion from an interested few. And I think luckily there's enough of those people around to support good writing.
It's interesting that you mentioned Taibbi and Rogan, because I'm fans of theirs too, but a weird shift seems to have happened in the culture in the last few years where, depending on who you ask, Joe Rogan is like an alt-right icon, and Matt Taibbi kind of, once he started reporting, not being so flattering towards, democratic politics, the tide seems to have turned. And even in your film, there's that wonderful quote from Thompson about how, he was so popular among his base in Pitkin County that he could walk down the street naked, holding a couple of bombs and not get arrested, which mirrors eerily Donald Trump's 2016 campaign about shooting someone on Fifth Avenue or whatever. Do you think Thompson would have been seen in the same light today, or would he have been seen as like a liberal icon or more of like a libertarian icon?
Yeah, I mean, I think that whatever you want to call it, the Trump derangement syndrome or something has kind of rattled the Democratic Party. And I think that the people that lean a little more to the libertarian or angle have sort of, been forced out of it a bit. I also think that Project Mockingbird is alive and well. And, these, like the actual people calling for Taibbi's head or Rogan's head, might be kind of misled by the security state gone wrong. So,
But that's a crazy conspiracy theory, don't you know?
hey, for the man whose grandfather was mysteriously killed, for believing it.
Touche. Yeah, and that's something that I've noticed about Thompson as I've gotten older, and it definitely came across while watching your film. Is I used to be, and maybe this was because I was influenced by the Gilliam film, which I think I saw. That was my introduction to Thompson, and then I discovered the books. So I was in for the whole kind of wild and crazy character. But as I've gotten older, I've seen more nuance to him, and also to the movement that he was starting. It's one thing to look at Aspen and say, yeah, we don't want to have these developers coming in and bulldozing, mom and pop shops to put up condos and ski resorts and things. But then it's also, do we want a lot of, I'm going to use that phrase, dirty hippies, like hanging around and smoking dope and causing problems? It's not quite as clear cut as that, but there is a bit of establishment rising in me as I get older. Did that happen to you, or are you still firmly on the side of the rebels?
Well, I think that he was sort of using Aspen as a platform to then possibly run for senator of Colorado and then possibly even president. I think he just sort of recognized that it was because of the fact that a lot of the wealthier people buying houses there didn't actually live there. There was just sort of an odd demographic chance to kind of have a voter base that was sort of not traditional left or right, and kind of you could create this sort of odd freak coalition, and then just by proving you could win, you could kind of take it to the national level. I think he saw like Timothy Leary running in California, or Norman Mailer in New York, and they never really had a chance. It was a pure protest vote. But I think he really thought that it would sort of coalesce into a national movement. I think that's in his writing. But no, I don't think he didn't want to sort of empower a bunch of junkies or whatever to go sitting outside the school where his kid went. I think he was just sort of using also that rhetoric to get the national press interested, which would create the snowball effect to get, to make people look at his real plan, which was sort of more to do with sensible policing and stuff like that.
The two details that I hadn't, I think, really thought about, or I don't even know if I knew them, or if I had, I forgot them, that were really kind of revelatory, was coming down to, the election. The Rolling Stone piece, was it, I can't remember what it was called, something in the Rockies, not Fear and Loathing on the Rockies, but
Freak Power in the Rockies.
Freak Power in the Rockies. Yes, thank you. That came out. Yeah. And it caused kind of a stir in the town and drummed up a lot of negative publicity towards Thompson. And I think it kind of backfired on him. He thought he was doing, a good thing. And then the other bit of information was that on election day, when everyone was out pounding the pavement and campaigning for him, he was at home with Juan, watching boxing and, kind of teaching about Muhammad Ali, which was a touching scene. But I can't help but wonder if those two decisions, if he had just kind of gone the other way on those, if he would have, better cemented his chances of winning, or if the system was always just going to be against him because of that coalition of left and right teaming up to take him out.
Well, he blamed the article coming out at the wrong time for his loss. Pretty, I think it's sort of, it was weird because had they released it a month earlier, they could have used it to register additional voters. Or if they had released it a month later, he probably would have won because nobody would have seen him coming. It was just kind of a self-sabotage, as they say, and maybe that was just part of his personality.
Something else that I've seen, I've read about Hunter Thompson, I've read about this race, I've seen documentary footage on it. And every time I've seen the archival footage of Carol Whitmire, he strikes me as being a stiff, kind of just almost like a small town prejudiced lawman. The way that he's portrayed in your film is very different. He's, very much letter of the law, but he seems to be very much letter of the law, anti-corruption, almost like a relic of the past. He doesn't like Thompson and his ilk because he's sort of morally opposed to them, but it doesn't seem like he's willing to do anything it takes to drive them out of town. Is this something that is this
Yeah.
creative license, or is this something that you kind of discovered about him in your research?
Well, there's not, you know, I just sort of read about as much as there is about Whitmire, and he seemed like he wasn't the villain of this story, you know, and I didn't want to make him into the villain because I think that's counterproductive. What you want to show is that kind of everybody here is suffering from the same problem, which is like none of the people who voted against Hunter, they're like none of their grandchildren can afford to live in Aspen now. So look, it was over for everybody. He just saw the writing on the wall, and I think Whitmire was kind of a tragic character in the end, and he, you know, interestingly, he got fired like 2 years later because his deputies were selling drugs out of the evidence locker, and there you go. You know, it's not like I think he was kind of a sad sack, but but who knows? I don't think there's, you know, I don't think there were any like overtly evil characters. There's just people trying to make money and, you know, people trying to keep their job.
Do you know if Juan and Sandy Thompson, have they seen the movie?
They haven't seen it. We haven't shown it to anyone yet, but I think they'll see it in the next week. I got to give Juan a call.
Any idea how he'll take it? Or, I mean, it's not that you've got anything incendiary, I don't think, in here, but just a general feeling. And were you conscious of the fact that these folks might watch the movie that you were working on? Did that affect you at all?
Yeah, I think we tried to, you know, tread lightly in terms of their characters. I think you kind of got to do that. You don't want to but I think they'll enjoy it. I think we made Juan out to be pretty cute, and I think we were close to showing what Sandy was real like in real life, which she was like Hunter's gal Friday or whatever you want to call it, left hand. You know, just really supported him. You know, she was earning the money while he was out writing for free in those early years, and she was his backbone. And, you know, I think that was kind of also part of the Hunter Part 1, Hunter Part 2. It's like that, you know, the fame has its problems, and it comes with some money, but it also comes with with trouble. More money, more problems, right?
Yeah.
I think they'll like it. I hope they will.
Were you able to shoot like in Aspen and around these, you know, on pretty much in the locations that the stories took place, or did you have to go elsewhere?
No, we shot entirely in Silverton, Colorado. It's sort of it's in the San Juan Mountains, but it, unlike Aspen, did not experience the boom in the, you know, 80s and 90s. So Aspen, like you have trouble finding even one angle where there isn't, like, you wouldn't have to throw up a green screen or, you know, just to get all the modern stuff. But Silverton, which has a wonderful film commission and was really, really helpful when we were making the movie, is just, it's like a 1970s set. Basically, you can basically just film there openly, and as long as you get the modern cars out of the way, you're in 1970.
Wow. So were there any particular, you know, challenges that you faced while making the movie? I mean, aside from this being like your
Yeah.
first big, you know, because you directed a documentary a number of years ago, but this is your first narrative feature, so I imagine that's kind of a different beast.
I think we probably had 2 or 3 times as many challenges as your average independent film, just because of the nature of the beast. And my favorite one to recount is that we basically, you know, we built the Owl Farm set, and we were planning on basically, you know, having our first couple of weeks of shooting just in the house. It seemed like an easy way to start. Jay, who played Hunter, was living in the house to get himself in character. We had all the, you know, the real photos and all that cool stuff up on the walls. It was set up to look as much like the real place that I'd been to as we could. And then our set designer drove the box truck into the electrical line on our, like, right before we started shooting, knocked the power line down into the house, and completely basically destroyed our ability to get electricity there. And it was also a safety hazard, so we couldn't have anybody in or around the house. Then we realized that the electricity was actually illegally rigged back in like the 50s, so we had to pay to bury the fucking power lines. in order to get into the house, and it completely threw off our schedule. We were scrambling, rewriting all of our, flying in actors that we didn't think we needed until later. And we basically almost stopped shooting over it, but we persevered. But that was in the first 5 days. And then it just kept, it was like running from the Indiana Jones boulder, just like one thing after the other, trying not to get mowed down.
So you had to engage in some Gonzo filmmaking to pull everything off?
Certainly, certainly some of the craziest stuff I've ever had to do, and not just in filmmaking, but in any aspect of my life. But luckily the people of Silverton really stepped up. They did us a lot of favors, and they got us through it. And, it's hard making a movie. What can I say?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, that's good.
So what, in terms of these, adjustments and changes, you said you had to do some rewrites. Was there anything that you had to drop or that got lost from script to screen that you really wish you'd had time or resources to pull off?
Oh yeah, we probably, stuff. That's just the nature of filmmaking. It turns out certain things are impossible. That in itself, the schedule dictates what you can do, and especially on an indie film. I mean, we shot this thing in 19 days, so we had no room for error, and there were quite a few errors. So, Lord knows, I could write a book about all the stuff that went wrong, but I prefer not to list anything in particular because it's embarrassing.
well, what's the one thing that, I assume that you finished the movie, you're happy with it, but what's the one thing like, damn it, if only the fates had aligned on this one thing?
Well, I mean, we wanted to shoot we were thinking about ending it with him going off to Vegas, which is sort of what happened in real life. And we were going to get to the car and we were going to do the whole thing. We also had like the Hells Angels playing a minor role in the film, but then there turned out there was an actual Hells Angel in town. He threatened to stomp us and call in his buddies if and he took the jersey, because we had the colors or whatever that said Hells Angel. He took it from us, and we're like, okay.
They're still holding on to that, huh? After 50 plus years.
They're still kicking, and I'm not trying to piss them off. So,
speaking of Vegas, there's a scene towards the end. I think it's actually on election day where Whitmire stops Thompson and one of his campaign crew, and they're in the Cadillac with the top down. The composition just feels like it's right out of that early scene in the novel. Was that an intentional framing on your part, I assume?
Yeah, one of our like motifs, I guess you could call it, that we kind of started out with a lot of still tripod shots, and then as the movie got crazier, we went handheld into the more Terry Gilliam style, and that's definitely like peak Gilliam right there. But that's also a true story. He got pulled over on election day driving around, so had to put it in there.
Awesome. Well, congratulations on the film. I really, I'm a huge Hunter Thompson fan, obviously, and I appreciated being able to watch something that isn't just like the other things that I've seen before, and that add more to my understanding of him as a person. So, what's the one thing that really surprised you about him that you discovered while putting this together?
I just think that the thing the depth of his political understanding is stunning when you get into those letter books, and it sort of makes you cry for what could have been had he been victorious. I think he really could have changed the United States, because if he had won in Aspen, it would have been such a wild news story that I think it could have gone national. It could have become a national movement, and we could have had a third party in America by now.
Oh. Well, here's to hoping there's another Hunter Thompson out there that breaks through. And I think that your film ends on a kind of an inspiring political message, kind of the history repeating itself in some negative ways, but also in a very hopefully positive way. So again, congratulations. Thank you for hanging out and talking with me about the film. Fear and Loathing in Aspen is now playing in select theaters. So Bobby Kennedy III, I appreciate it.
Freak power.
Freak power. All right. Take care, man.
See ya.
I